Hello and welcome to Good Evening Britain, a Force for Good's weekly show coming to you live from our studios here in the heart of the great British city of Glasgow with me, your host, Alistair McConnachie, broadcasting on all our digital platforms throughout the United Kingdom and across the world. We're bringing you quality pro-UK comment and analysis every Wednesday from 7 until 8 p.m, broadcasting on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter, and also on TikTok. Please, folks, tell us where you're viewing from. Send in your comments, send in your questions, send in your greetings on this lovely, scorching summer day. And you know what? The sun is shining because Sturgeon has been arrested. It was a long time coming, but it's here at last. Released, obviously, as we know, without charge, but nevertheless read her rights. Let's just savour that picture for a moment. See it on TikTok there. Sturgeon arrested. Who would have thought it would ever come to this? You know, there's been two previous SNP First Ministers, and both of them have found themselves in trouble with the law, and both of them have been arrested by Police Scotland. Can you believe that? There's only been two previous SNP First Ministers, and both of them have been arrested. You know, they say all political careers end in failure. I think that was attributed to Enoch Powell. Well, if you're an SNP First Minister, all political careers end in arrest. And I wonder how the SNP diehards deal with this. How do they deal with this news? How do they deal with the fact that their First Ministers always end up getting arrested? You know, these are the people who will say, oh, Westminster's so corrupt, etc., etc., as if Holyrood is somehow going to be better. When will they realise? When will they realise that there's no specialness about Scotland that means that Holyrood is not subject to all the human failures and failings that Westminster, or indeed any parliament worldwide, is subject to? So have I kept this on the screen long enough? I think I have. I'm definitely rubbing the point in here, aren't I? Delicious. Delicious news. What's your thoughts? What's your thoughts on that, people? Debbie's first in tonight, says, good evening, everybody. What a Scorchio. Scorchio. Derek, good evening to you and to our fellow Unionist friends. Finally, Sturgeon is arrested, yet freed. How many times before they are finally charged? How many times must an SNP First Minister walk into a Police Scotland office and answer questions before you can call him or her an ex-First Minister? I think that was a Bob Dylan song. How many times? We have a guest tonight, which Derek has spotted. Our guest this evening is going to be Liz Phillips. Liz is the organiser of the Great Resist conference, which is going to be in Newport in South Wales on Saturday the 24th, and she's going to be telling us all about the Great Resist and the speakers that are there. And I'm very grateful to say that I was invited to be a speaker. Unfortunately, the logistics of getting to Newport have confounded me, but I am going to be doing a short 10-minute broadcast by video for them, so I'm very, very grateful to Liz for that. There's Liz there, and she's going to be our guest, the brilliant Liz Phillips, organiser of the Great Resist Conference. Ryan says good evening from the West Riding, as does Adam. Hello, Adam, from the great British county of Leicestershire. And to Kat, and to Ken, and to Melissa, and to Catherine, and Paul, who's viewing from the great British city of Inverness, and to Sandra from Glasgow. Ken is in a wet Marseille. Good for you, Ken. The sun is shining in the sky and there ain't a cloud in light, says the Electric Light Orchestra. Hello to Stuart and British Legends. Stephen says, Top Man Alistair, best wishes from Belfast. Well, thank you. Today, the 14th of June, was the day back in 1690 when King William landed in Carrickfergus, which is somewhere near Belfast. I know that. Paul says he sees that the SNP have sent flowers to Sturgeon. They have indeed. That was in today's Daily Mail. Suspend her from the party. We're going to send her a bunch of flowers, says the SNP deputy. Can you believe that? You fail upwards, definitely, in the Scottish National Party. But one good thing about this is Alex Salmond was asked for his comment, and he says, I know what I would do regarding whether or not Nicola Sturgeon should resign. And I know what Nicola Sturgeon would have done with Nicola Sturgeon if there had been other people in other circumstances. In other words, if Nicola Sturgeon was deciding whether or not to fire Nicola Sturgeon, she would have fired Nicola Sturgeon, according to Alex Salmond's logic here, which I can understand. He added, I'm suggesting that Nicola Sturgeon would have suspended Nicola Sturgeon under these circumstances. No question about that. Well, that would be good if she could suspend herself, wouldn't it? In other words, to resign as an MSP. But this is interesting. He said the SNP is facing an extinction event and has to shift the narrative. And he added that he would not have stood down as First Minister in 2014 if, quote, I had been able to see what was going to transpire. Well, there you go. He would not have stood down in 2014 if he had, in fact, been some kind of clairvoyant, which, as we know, he is most certainly not. As Christopher says here, as a cult, they are impervious to any criticism and self-reflection. That's for sure. Stuart wonders if the new head cop is worth her salt. She will jail Sturgeon at all. Well, time will tell. Time will tell. And yes, are we paying for these flowers? That's the question. Are we paying for these flowers? I bet you they've got it on taxpayer expenses. No question about that. That'll be another thing. And Alistair Jack, like in 3 years' time, will get round to it and go, oh, we shouldn't have been paying for those flowers. And I wonder if they sent a card as well saying, sorry you've been arrested, you know. A sorry you've been arrested card. I wonder if they've got those in Asda. Actually, probably in this area of town they do. Only kidding, folks. So, something, I just mentioned Alistair Jack there, something political that I want to talk about, because in his last few months as Secretary of State for Scotland, because he's standing down in 2024, he's begun to actually do stuff, which is good, of course, but he's still getting one or two things. We would like to maybe help him to articulate some of this point that I'm about to make. He says here, quite rightly, he goes, from international security to trade and culture, the UK government's international departments and agencies are securing the interest of all parts of the United Kingdom. Scotland benefits hugely from what we do, says Alistair Jack. Well, of course it does, because Scotland is part of the United Kingdom. But then he goes on, he goes, the UK and Scottish governments, and you know how we don't like that latter phrase to be used as an equivalency with the UK government, enjoys a positive and productive working relationship, promoting Scotland overseas and contributing to growing Scotland's economy. The UK and Scottish governments, well, you see, if you're always talking about those two different centres as if they're equivalent, then a lot of people in Scotland who don't necessarily understand the constitutional relationship will say, well, if these are two equal governments, why is the UK one telling the Scottish one what to do? Of course, that's what people think. That's the obvious logical consequence of that phrase, that they're two equal governments. But then how can the UK one be setting up certain boundaries for the Edinburgh one, you see? So what we've said to them before, and we've written to them about this, but we're just going to have to keep doing it, is when if you can't bring yourself to say Scottish administration, then at least remind everybody that it's a devolved government. Okay, say the UK and devolved Scottish governments work together. Okay, say that. Make sure that people understand that Holyrood is a devolved arm of the British government. I mean, Holyrood is a British institution. We've written articles about this. It is a British institution. It's created by the Union Parliament. But it is a devolved institution. It does not have equivalency in any illegal way, in any constitutional way, with the UK Parliament. It's a devolved arm of it. And its intention from the very beginning was, if we are to believe the Labour Party, its intention was to strengthen the Union. Now, many of us thought that was going to be a difficult sell, and it was maybe probably not going to work out that way. But if we are to take Labour at their word, they did believe, so they told us, that it would strengthen the United Kingdom. Therefore, if you're a British politician, Labour, Tory or whatever, when you approach devolution, you should do so in a way to make sure to think, how does this strengthen the Union? How does this strengthen the Union? Okay? If devolution was set up to strengthen the Union, then everything needs to be done to figure out how to build that in to the model, how to build in a strengthening and growing Union into the model. But you see, the pro-UK parties completely lost control of that narrative, if they even began on it in the first place. And they allowed the narrative to develop into a point where it was Westminster trying to destroy devolution, Westminster trying to control the Scots. You know, they just lost it into a Scottish nationalist narrative. The Unionist narrative got lost because nobody was putting it together. Nobody was verbalising it, apart from us, of course, who have been verbalising the true Unionist narrative since the very beginning. But the point is, we can equally say the principle of devolution was to strengthen the Union at its beginning. That's what it was. The principle of devolution was intended to strengthen the Union. Therefore, if you are a UK Secretary of State or the Prime Minister, whatever, and you are doing anything connected with devolution, you can sell that as strengthening the Union. And you should make sure that you do that you do strengthen the Union, that you don't allow devolution to weaken the Union. You don't do anything which will harm the Union. You don't give more and more and more and more powers to the devolved arms to the point where the centre has got nothing left, which is what Labour want to do. You've got to be conscious that certain powers will weaken the Union, so those powers have to be strictly controlled, or if it looks like some powers that you've previously devolved are indeed weakening the Union, then take them back or limit them in some way. But don't be afraid to strengthen the Union. Don't be afraid to keep the UK together. And you can go back to the founding fathers of devolution to see that that's, if we take them at their word, that's what they wanted to do. Talking about that, there was a petition that somebody set up to, quote, hold a referendum on ending devolution in Scotland. And this was set up on the UK Government and Parliament petition page. And if you get 10,000 signatures, you get an official response from the UK Government. And this official response came in, has been sent to me by a colleague who who acquired it, the official response. And I don't know who wrote this, but it must have been maybe some intern from abroad that doesn't even know what devolution is, or certainly not what the union is. And one of the benefits of devolution, because it's all about benefits of devolution, and it goes, devolution brings a host of economic benefits and growth opportunities to Scotland through UK government initiatives. What? Don't you mean the union brings a host of economic benefits and growth opportunities to Scotland? Devolution doesn't bring it. It's the union and the UK government that brings it. So they got that reversed the wrong way around. And then it continues, the benefits of devolution enable Scotland to share in the overall strengths of the United Kingdom. No, that's a benefit of the union, not a benefit of devolution. The benefits of devolution are also evident through initiatives such as the UK government's flagship Levelling Up Fund. No, that's a benefit of the union. That's a benefit for pooling and sharing. That's not a benefit of devolution. Who writes this stuff? And you can be sure they're on a good salary as well. Utter nonsense. Utter nonsense. Eric says, nice touch with the Falklands flag, a great tribute to our fallen heroes. Well, today is the 41st anniversary of victory in the Falklands, and I'll be speaking about that in a minute, and I'll also be speaking about that flag. But thanks for noticing that, Eric. Derek says, you wonder who writes this crap. And Catherine, utter charlatans. I'm afraid so. Nicholas Stubborn says, if anyone votes for the SNP cult and the grubby Greens in the next election, then they seriously need help. Yes, the soggy Greens, or the Scottish Cabbage Party, as we have been wont to describe them. Now, we've got our guest coming up at the bottom of the hour at 7:30, and it's Liz Phillips, who is the organiser of the Great Resist conference, which is going to be in Newport on Saturday, the 24th of June, and she'll be telling us exactly all about that and the topics that are going to be discussed, and also why she wanted to put this conference together with her colleagues. So definitely stay around for that. If you're on TikTok, you won't see that interview, but you will see that interview at youtube.com/UK A Force for Good. Hello to Derek from Armadale. Now, well, let's talk about the Falklands flag. And it's a version of the Falklands flag, we should say, on this day in British history matters, because it was on this day, on the 14th of June in 1982, 41 years ago, at 9 o'clock Falkland Islands time, that the commander of the Argentinian garrison in Stanley, which is the capital of the Falkland Islands, General Mario Menendez, surrendered to Major General Jeremy Moore, commander of the British land forces. And his message conveying the Argentine surrender said, quote, "The Falkland Islands are once more under the government desired by their inhabitants. God save the Queen." Signed, Jeremy Moore, Major General Jeremy Moore. And we've got one or two pictures here that we'll run through. And that is in the garden of the Government House, which is the house of the governor, and that's the governor's flag there that's being raised up in the grounds, and that was being raised by the Royal Marines. And I read an article today. Sergeant Major Bill Muir said, quote, "Major General Moore, the commander of land forces, gave our detachment the honour of replacing the Falkland Islands flag at Government House, as we were the ones that were there when it was taken down." Okay, next pic. And that's Major General Jeremy Moore, commander of the British Land Forces. He's passed away now. He passed away in 2007. Okay. That's another flag being raised on Victory Day. Not quite sure exactly where, very possibly in Stanley. And that's the flag, the Falkland Islands flag. And the motto is Desire the Right. And Desire is the name of that ship which belonged to Captain John Davis, who spotted the Falkland Islands way back in 1592. And so that ship's gone down in the heritage of the Falkland Islands. And that sheep there, that particular flag dates from 1948. Before they put the sheep on it, it was a sea lion. And before they put a sea lion on it, it was a bullock. So that's the flag. That's the one that I've got in the background there. And that's a couple of likely lads at the darts, the World Darts at Lakeland in 2022 with that flag that I've got behind me that says British Falkland Islands. Okay. There's a badge. The Falklands Forever British. Okay. And there's the Argentinian football team with a banner saying the Falklands are British. Which is lovely to see. And before anybody writes in and says that can't possibly be true, you're right, it can't possibly be true. Somebody photoshopped it, but I saved it and I always thought that was a hilarious pic from the Argentine football team. Okay. So I'll ask a question about that in a couple of minutes, just before we bring on our guest at 7:30. Before that, however, I want to mention a couple of things that are happening in Glasgow. Now, tomorrow night, Thursday, at the Tron Church, there is going to be a presentation by the Scottish Union for Education, which is a breakaway union for teachers and people who support teachers. And it's entitled Let Kids Be Kids. Our government is sexualising children with its sex and gender curriculum. Children need education, not indoctrination. That's tomorrow night, 15th of June, at the Tron Church in Bath Street, at 25 Bath Street, which is just 5 or 6 minutes walk around from Queen Street Station, and that's on at 6:30 to 8:30 at the Tron Church. And as I say, it's the Scottish Union for Education, which has just recently been set up, and it aims to involve more people from communities, including parents, grandparents and educators, to improve Scottish educational establishments as places of learning rather than sites of activism. So they're against promoting all the basically contested ideologies, as they say here, and political clauses, including that of critical race theory, and the sex and gender propaganda, basically, which children are being subjected to an astonishingly and really quite wicked level, actually. A real weird agenda going on in Scottish schools. And so the SUI, the Scottish Union for Education, is fighting back against that, and they're at scottishunionforeducation.co.uk. So just gave them a mention there. They're definitely worth supporting, and maybe we'll look into seeing if we can get maybe one or two of their people on the show going forward. What else is happening? We are going to be doing 2 weekends of activism. This Saturday we're going to be out with our street stall. If you would like to join us this Saturday, please do contact us and we'll give you the details. We'll tell you where and when and so on. And then on the 24th, I can't make it down to Newport, but what we are going to be doing is we're going to Dundee, and we are going to be outside the SNP's Convention for Independence, as they're calling it, which they were going to hold back in March, but circumstances intervened in such a way that they've had to delay it. So this is going to be Humza Yousaf's first big speech to the party membership outside in the Caird Hall in Dundee on Saturday the 24th, and we're going to be outside gently educating the people going in and out about the value of the United Kingdom and about the value of our union, our social solidarity, and the importance of pooling and sharing our economic resources. So if you'd like to join us for that, when that's going to prove a fun day, then please come along. Please do come along. Please tell us, please contact us by any means. Send us an email at contact@aforceforgood.uk. Tell us that you're interested, and we will excuse me, we will keep you informed about all of the details. We're also looking for somebody to film the Scottish Nationalist March, which is going to be in Stirling on that same day as well. So if you can film the Scottish Nationalist March on Saturday the 24th in Stirling, please contact us and we'll tell you exactly what you need to do and where you need to be and all of that kind of thing. And if you need some help with transport getting there, we can certainly help you do that as well. Good. So a busy month left in June. A busy month left for us. Now, just before I bring on Liz at the bottom of the hour, what else is happening this weekend? British Wide is Trooping the Colour, which is the King's birthday celebration, also known as Trooping the Colour, and that's going to be televised live on BBC One in the morning from about 10 or 10:30. And that's always a very spectacular thing, and it looks like it's going to be spectacular weather as well for it. So do share a thought for these guardsmen in their bearskins on Saturday, Trooping the Colour. And I bring up that also to say that we've always believed that the Monday of the King's birthday weekend should be a national holiday. And people always say, oh, we should have a British day, and sometimes they come up with obscure dates in the past, or they come up with controversial political events and stuff like that, none of which are relevant for a British-wide celebration or a British-wide summer bank holiday. But the King's birthday weekend, which is always the second or third weekend in June, that should be the date for a British Day bank holiday, a United Kingdom Day bank holiday. Call it what you will, but we definitely need one of those things, and we've been promoting that for years now, and we've got an article on that as well, which you'll find in the links. Now, folks, our guest this evening is Liz Phillips, the organiser of the Great Resist Conference, which is a conference that's going to be in Newport on Saturday the 24th of this month. And so we're going to bring Liz in, and please do say hello. Hello there, Liz.
Good evening. Good evening, Scotland. How are you? And the rest of the UK and the world, wherever you're broadcasting to, Alistair. It's so kind of you to have me on, and thank you.
You're very welcome, Liz. You're very welcome, and thank you for agreeing to come on. And you've got a nice flag there in the background as well, which is good to see. I think we've got more Union Jacks than you in our background at the moment, but there's very few people that have got as many as us.
I can do plenty.
Oh, you're good. Excellent. Well, do you know what I'd like, please, Liz, if you could just introduce yourself briefly to the audience so that they know who you are and where you're coming from, and if you can just do that. So what's your pedigree, as it were?
Well, I'm sad to say, for anybody that wanted to remain in the European Union, my pedigree, if you like, politics-wise, is I worked first of all with the referendum party, and then when God decided Sir James Goldsmith was wanted in heaven and not here on earth, I then joined UKIP, and I worked out in Mid Wales where I lived, and we started from naught, as you know, and our aim was to get the UK back and under the UK's control. We didn't fancy too much being under the control of other people. So I worked very hard for nearly 30 years. In part of that time, I lived in France as well, and was pleased to see that the rural French are exactly the same as the British. They hate the EU as much as we do. They don't hate. There's always this thing. It's a bit like Scotland and England. The Scots hate the English, and the English hate the Scots. Nothing could be further from the truth, really, when you get to the real people. It's the political elite, as we call them. I don't know why we call them elite, because they're far from that. But it's the political elite that cause all the problem. And so we wanted control back in this country. And I could never understand the Scottish government under Nicola Sturgeon wanting to come out of the UK, but to go into the EU, which is even, further removed. Excuse me. Sorry.
Yes, well, the reason they do that is just because it makes things awkward for Westminster. It's very much my enemy's enemy is my friend, really, is the way that they look on that. What I'd like to do, Liz, is just bring up the programme which we've got here for Saturday the 24th, and I'll just quickly run through it. People might not be able to read that, but it begins with talking about alternative media and free speech, the importance of free speech. It goes on talking about the importance of child protection, especially in Wales. And then there's someone speaking about woke in our educational institutions. And then I'm very pleased that the next three speakers, including myself, I'm glad to say, are one's from Scotland. That's me, keeping Scotland in the UK. Jason Lloyd-Davies from the United in Britain, keeping Wales in the UK, and somebody from Northern Ireland to be decided. Goes on talking then about climate change, and then we're talking about the importance of cash and the dangers of central digital currency, and then going on to talk about the fourth industrial revolution, which I believe is possibly the phrase that Klaus Schwab came up with, and then finishing with the importance of individuals in the fight. Okay, so people can see there that that's hitting a lot of buttons, as it were, a lot of the sort of things that have come out, especially in the last 2 years. Can I ask you, what gave you the idea to pull something like this together in a conference?
Well, what's happened after UKIP virtually finished, and of course I worked directly for Nigel Farage and then the great Gerard Batten, and so I worked at the top really, right over the referendum, etc. and since. But after that, we can all see, Alistair, what's happening worldwide. Let's forget for a minute the UK. We've got the UK ostensibly, we're out of the EU, we should all be back together. But if you look at what's happening worldwide, first of all, we had COVID, and we could all see that everybody followed across the world a pattern which we've never seen before. So most of us realised that something awful was going on that had got nothing to do with the disease. So we started something called Freedom Digital Broadcasting, and we broadcast live on television on both Roku and Amazon Fire. I'm sorry, I said live, but mostly they're pre-records. But I've recorded right at the very beginning some of the people that are now household names who I knew, like us, went to all the marches, etc., and knew that we were being sold a pup, if you like. So we started Freedom Digital Broadcasting, and I've got many connections. When I started my political career, I was in Mid Wales, and very much like Scotland, totally rural. And so Wales was a branch, would you believe? Instead of you have a branch in every town, etc., the whole of Wales was a branch when I started. And I worked with a tremendous gentleman called Hugh Mulwyn Hughes. And I went down and gave a talk a few weeks ago to the Free Libertarians in South Wales. And afterwards, Hugh and I sunk a couple of bottles of wine, as you do, back at his place with his wife. And we decided that talking is now over, really, with the Great Reset and Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum, the United Nations, the Trilateral Commission. And for those of you who don't know anything about the Trilateral Commission, please look it up. And you'll see that the member that we have on it for the UK is none other than Sir Keir Starmer. And if you think that you wonder why there's no opposition in Parliament, I suggest you all have a look. And then you've got things like the World Health Organization, etc., etc. But we all know about these people. We all know about their agendas, Alistair. And what we thought of was we've got to do something because the politicians aren't doing anything. If you could see the correspondence I've written over the last 3-4 years to politicians, begging them to explain to their constituents, explain in Parliament what is happening with all these agendas, climate change, etc., of which, of course, there's always been climate change, but it's nothing as we're being told. You know that, we know that. And so we came up after 2 bottles of wine at 3 o'clock in the morning with the Great Resist. So Hugh said, right, what are you going to do about it? And this was about nearly 3 months ago. So we thought, right, this is it. Now, the Great Resist were putting together, this is worldwide, not just for the UK, but for individuals and small or large organisations that are fighting any part of what is being thrown at us. You talked a minute ago about a do, I think, this Saturday in Glasgow, where you've got against the education indoctrination that's been with our children at the moment. Now, yes. These organisations, we don't want to change them at all, and that we're not in this for money or anything, but we want the umbrella of the Great Resist, and then everybody to come together under one banner, still doing everything they do. But you know, we've got Public Child Protection Wales that are speaking now. You know, at the next conference, I'd like the Scottish people to talk, but to all come together under one website, and then so that everybody can see that we're not just, you know, 2 or 3 people or 10 people or 30 people battling away in a small corner. So that's why we pulled it all together. And South Wales, because I have a lot of connections in South Wales, and they've worked so hard down there in all these small groups, Alistair. I'm fed up with everything going to London, as I'm sure you're fed up with everything going to Glasgow and Edinburgh. You know, you wouldn't think that anywhere else existed on the planet except London. And so we decided to launch in Newport at the Neon. And the Neon has got absolutely everything. It's close to the railway station. It's got all the recording. It was a cinema. It's absolutely lovely. It's got everything there that you could possibly wish for. So that's why we're launching down there. And, of course, most importantly, if we get together a force for good, No Cymru, which is united in Britain, and David Vance in Northern Ireland, we have got to keep the UK together. They want to split up because, of course, if we're all split up, they can do what they like with us, and we're not having it.
Yes, so that's a good point. You know, sometimes you'll hear from Scottish nationalists in particular, they'll say, oh, because the Westminster politicians in some cases have made a complete hash of it, then it's better that we just break away, and as if somehow separated we're going to make a better hash of it. And it doesn't really work that way. You know, you have to work on the premise that politicians are mere human beings, and as we've seen this week, they get arrested regardless of where they happen to be, whether it's Holyrood or Westminster. And so the question is, it's as far as fighting these big national things are concerned, it's important to have a national centre that can stand up for them, and it's important to encourage our national members of Parliament at a British level, at the big central level, at the wider level, at the pan-British level, to to engage with our issues and to change things at that level. Things can be changed at that level if we simply have the people who can stand up for them. The problem is finding the politicians who are in a position, whether mentally or physically, to be able to stand up. We're very lucky. Recently we've had Andrew Bridgen, who's stood up and has been able to articulate the concerns of a lot of people. That it's not all the people with his concerns, but there's a substantial number of people who believe what he believes, and they've had no representation in Parliament whatsoever. Of 650 MPs, he is the only one strongly articulating the position that's held by a very substantial number of people in the United Kingdom. So you have to say, how does that situation come about? How is there only one man articulating that? So something is seriously wrong. So good for him for doing it. But of course he's got chucked out at the Tory party for doing it. So that doesn't set a very good precedent for anybody else who's thinking of doing that, and who, for example, may not be a person of means, and so they're relying upon their job, and so they just keep their head down and they don't rock the boat. And unfortunately, the British political system's a bit set up like that, but so is any political system, I suppose. It just depends. Do you have hope that there's going to be more people coming through who can speak to these matters?
I wouldn't hold your breath, Alistair, on that. If you saw the individual letters, because although, I've worked in London, and a lot of people know me from working with Nigel and Gerard, etc., in the House of Commons, so I'm not unknown, if you know what I mean. And I've written to all these people, begging them to stand up and, do what they should do. And they are there, to look after us and to articulate what we feel. And I think they're either bought or they're thick or they're both. And, I've got to that, I'm sorry, stage. And, you've got Andrew Bridgen. I should think the Tory party actually have done themselves the biggest disservice, because Andrew, now standing by himself, or for Reclaim and Lawrence Fox, he can say precisely what nobody wants to hear in Parliament. So I think they've done themselves a huge disservice. But I think it's absolutely wonderful. But, there are people there at the end of their political careers that are a lot older. You've got people like Christopher Choke and Desmond Swain and Esther McVeigh and Philip Davis and John Redwood and Ian Duncan Smith. All these people, they're at the end of their political careers. So it wouldn't hurt them at all to stand up and explain exactly what's going on, why we're in the mess that we're in. Because it's quite obvious to all of us, I know it is to you because we've had this conversation, that we're not being governed properly by our own governments. They are puppets of somebody else.
Mm-hmm. Yes. It's definitely that's a conclusion that you can very easily come to just by looking at the evidence on these matters. And the last 2 or 3 years really hit home as well. I remember when they were bringing in the emergency legislation for the disease that we mustn't mention on YouTube anyway, when they were bringing in the emergency legislation, everybody voted for that. Even the one or two of the Tories who had tried to develop a reputation for themselves as being sort of free-thinking libertarians, I won't mention any names, but even they voted for these emergency regulations, which were very severe and I would argue went against British values as far as things like freedom of assembly and freedom of travel and freedom of speech are. Well, they definitely went against all of these three things in a very bad way. And if you, shutting the churches down, that was a terrible thing, just from a symbolic perspective as well. When I saw the government do that, it was like, that's almost like, King Herod or something like that. That's what he would do. And unfortunately, of course, many of the churches went along with it. In fact, I think virtually they all did.
But of course, they didn't want, the reason for that is they didn't want people to get together and talk so people could actually start to put a wedge in. I don't know how many of your viewers know of Pastor Arthur Pawlowski in Canada, and he stood up and he threw the police out. Now, he's had a terrible time since. They've thrown him in and out of jail. They can't make any allegations stick. It's a bit like Trump. And he's an absolutely wonderful man. He was Polish by birth. Both he and his brother are pastors. And I thought, if only we could throw out the Archbishop of Canterbury and all the mealy-mouthed bishops that we've got and have a pastor called Arthur Pawlowski over here in charge, we might have seen a little bit of a different outcome. And you have to go back when you look at totalitarian regimes or any of these regimes. The first thing that goes is the family, or the two things that go are family and religion, Alistair. So you can see that it is a pattern that's happened many times in the past. And, you know, how the church allowed it to happen, I just don't know.
Yeah, I think one of the things, and I'm always trying to look on the best side of people's human nature. I'm always trying to make excuses for them. But there was an awful lot of people, churchy people, who actually believed that they were about to die if they walked out the door. You know, there was a lot of people who literally believed the fear. Believed the fear. Have you got a poltergeist there in your house?
I can't tell you. It's okay. We're absolutely fine.
Right.
No problem at all.
Good. So yeah, a lot of people just believed the fear, and that, of course, helped the state to do exactly what it did. And so that's another thing. You know, people did, while the media and the government promoted the panic, it was helped by the fact that an awful lot of people actually believed it. You know, 100% believed the worst elements of it. You know, many of us thought, well, let's take care and be careful and so on. But some people really did panic about it. And when you've got a substantial number of people panicking, then it introduces a new dynamic into the situation, which can make things even worse, which I think we were witnessing. I've certainly witnessed that.
But nobody was listening, Alistair, to the alternative, because you couldn't get the message out that this was all planned, etc. You know, you've got to look at Event 201 that took place in America. Any of us that could, you know, what upsets me is my peers that I went to grammar school with, I can't remember when they stopped learning how to read, because it's all there. And, you know, you've only got to look at the UN's agenda 2021, 2030 and 2050. Just start there and look at the agendas and what they say they're going to do. And, you know, as I say, it is all there. And if you look at Event 201 that they held in 2019 in America, it was the, if you like, the forerunner, the play of what was going to happen when the pandemic hit. What did COVID stand for? How did it come? They named it, you know, at that time. They didn't wait for it to come out. It was all named beforehand. And then finally, there's a wonderful chap called Dr. David Martin, and I urge all your viewers to look at him. He has done more work than I did on the patents that have been taken out over the last, say, 20 years. Now, the one that astounded me was Microsoft have got a patent out on tracing people through their bodily fluids. You know, now you have to say, well, there's no way they can trace you through your bodily fluids unless they've got something in you to trace you with. And then how do they do that? And then you start looking at 5G. And then you start talking to people like Mark Steele. And then all the plans all come together. So this is what we're coming together now as the Great Resist, to actually put all this under one roof. On the one hand, you've got the Great Reset and all of the people behind that. On the other side, you've got all of us who've done the research, know what is happening, and so many people in their own way have come up with all sorts of different small organisations or written letters where we all get together and we resist it across the world. The other thing that people don't talk about is agriculture. And unfortunately, this time we haven't got room, but I've been working with people across the world, and, you know, they're trying to get rid of farming straight across the board, everywhere, including in this country. They're trying to move away. You're not going to be allowed to eat meat. You're going to end up eating bugs. You can only use all the fresh produce, etc. Look at what's happening in Holland at the moment. We've all got to come together, Alistair, and resist. And,
Yeah.
it's frightening.
Yeah. Well, I think one thing is for sure, and that is that there are more people who are. I don't like to use the phrase "waking up" because it's a bit corny, but there are more people who are beginning to ask questions. And as I also say, waking up's the easy bit. Getting out of bed is the difficult bit. And there are more people who are getting out of bed in that metaphorical sense and doing stuff. And you're certainly one of those people. And I'm also glad that you're bringing up stuff there like the dangers of losing our cash and converting everything to digital. And I'm seeing that more and more now, and going into some of the smaller superstores, and they've basically got all the machines are electronic. You can't even use cash in them, and there might be, well, you might still be able to use cash at the desk, but not for these automated machines. And that's really, really worrying, because a lot of people depend upon cash, especially people at the lower end of the income scale, who might be able to get a little bit of income, without declaring it, like doing jobs for people and getting a small pocket money that way. And I mean, there is a lot of people that depend upon cash payments because they simply don't have a job. They're not maybe capable of getting a job, and even if they had a job, they might not be that much better off. So I mean, cash is absolutely critical for a large number of people, and so if you stop them using cash, how are they going to survive?
Well, everybody needs to start using cash again. It's very easy, and I've been guilty of it. I'm sure you have, Alistair. We've got cards in our pocket. It's so easy, much easier than going to the bank and carrying a lot of cash around. So it is difficult though for many people, as you say, rural people. But it's quite interesting. If you go in, pretend you haven't noticed that you can only use a card. It's incredibly funny. You go to a branch and you fill up, and they say, we only take a card. And we say, well, that's terribly sad. I don't have a card. I only have cash. And you go to walk away and they say, well, get the police. They say, please do. Bring them. I've got legal tender. And you do that in a restaurant as well. It completely bamboozles them. But it's funny how they suddenly manage to take it. So I think we've all got to go back, even if we don't use it for large amounts, because sometimes that's difficult. The other thing, of course, is if you've got money in the bank, it doesn't belong to you. And this is what people don't understand, Alistair. When you put your money in the bank, it doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the bank. They can do with it what they will. And, you're a damn nuisance. And many people have said, when they've gone to get money out, the actual tellers now on the desk say, why do you want the money? Well, excuse me, what the hell has it got to do with you? But that is the question you're asked now, especially if you go into three figures. You can just about get away with it in two figures. You go for £100 or more, you get the cashier saying to you, why do you want the money? And, I have to say, I'm terribly sorry. It has got absolutely nothing to do with you. And I don't wish to be rude. I always say that. I don't wish to be rude. But, it's got nothing to do with you at all. But the sad thing is, of course, our pensions always go into the bank because, anybody that's a pensioner like myself, what else do you do? The frightening thing is if they then take control through digital currency, and then I've gone through a red light or I've called my MP a name that perhaps he doesn't like, I may be stopped from having the money that I have paid for all my life.
Well, we've seen them do that in Canada at the truckers' protest. That was another major wake-up call, that there's like, we don't actually like what you're campaigning about, so we're going to shut down your bank account and make you unable to transact or to receive donations or anything like that. I mean, the fact that they would actually do that to people in a Western world in a Western country such as Canada. That was just utterly shocking to me, utterly shocking. And what was even more shocking was that our Prime Minister at the time, which would be Boris Johnson, had nothing to say about that. You know, he was meant to be this great figure of freedom and so on, but he didn't say to his fellow Prime Minister, "Oh, you shouldn't do that, Justin. That's a step too far." He didn't even murmur anything. Just complete silence. Neither did anybody else. And I thought, well, they're all in on it. They're all approving of that.
They're either all bought or thick or both, all of them.
Yes.
And that's the thing that we've somehow now. The Great Resist is not about moaning about what's going to happen. It's about putting things together now to stop it. So it's a very positive day. We'll have a lot of fun, believe me, because there's nothing. Is it Corporal Jones and Dad's Army? They don't like it up 'em, Captain Mannering. No, they don't. And, you know, I'm all for putting it up 'em, I'm saying. And when you get it up there, I think it's a twist, okay? Get it up there and twist. So there we go. So we'll have a great deal of fun. Anybody
Quite right.
Newport on the 24th of June, it's a £5 to come. We've got some terrific speakers, really terrific, great fun.
Brilliant.
I'm sorry you're not there, Alistair, but I know you're going to give us a video to support the day anyway. So
yes, thank you very much for inviting me to speak, and I won't be able to be there, but we will be busy fighting the good fight in Dundee on that particular day. Jill says that she's going to be there. Well, let me just see. I saw a message here from Jill Sewell. Says going will take minutes for any who want to know how it goes. Now that might have been the event tomorrow night that she's speaking about. Stuart says that he loves your Bourgogne clock. Very nice. Very nice.
I lived in France for a while. It's lovely.
Good. Now, I'm just going to read out. If people want to find more, there is a banner here that I'm just going to put up. And it's the Great Resist Conference. Now, I've converted it to a tiny URL. So it's tinyurl.com/37 TPW7Y8. That's for the benefit of people who are listening on our podcast. And that will be on Saturday, the 24th of June, beginning in the morning. And it's in Newport in South Wales.
Anybody for tickets, Alistair, they just need to go onto the Neon Centre at Newport. They're only a £5, but as I say, we'll have a very, very positive day with some superb speakers, and we'll have a lot of fun as we go.
Good. Well, I wish you all the very best.
Thank you
for that, Liz, and I wish all your speakers the very best as well. I know you've got a great lineup there, and we'll push it between now and then as well. And I look forward to speaking with you in due course. So we'll say good night and all the best to you.
Thank you very much. Good night, everybody, and thank you for listening.
Good night. Good old Great Resist Conference. Fantastic. At Newport on the 24th. So, folks, now we're not going to be back next week. Next week's the 21st. We are going to take a day off because we need to prepare for our event in Dundee on the 24th. And again, if you'd like to join us there, please contact us and we'll tell you all about that. So we won't be here next week, but we'll be back the week after, which will be the 28th. Great. Well, what a fantastic guest we had tonight, and what fantastic comments came in. Sorry we couldn't get to them all, but thank you for everybody who was watching. This show is brilliant. It really does deserve so much more publicity than it gets at the moment. It really does deserve to be seen and heard so widely. So if you can share the program on Facebook, if you can share it on YouTube, If you can retweet this broadcast on Twitter, please do so, folks. It just helps us to get heard, and it allows our wonderful guests to get the maximum publicity as well. And we're going to keep doing this. We love doing it. It's our mission to keep the United Kingdom together and to reach out to everybody in the world who also shares that mission. So there we go. Rule Britannia. That's how we end it. Folks, it just remains for me to say, God bless the United Kingdom and God save the King. See you next time.